chapters 1 through 4. Whoa. Got you, Micah. Page 1, Dr. Dobson says he took a class in child development. And the professor said all behavior is caused by what we experience. Do you agree? No, this is someone who took a class and sent him a letter and said, do you agree? And what does Dobson say? Whoa! Not for a minute do I agree with this mechanistic view of things. Life is more than just behavior. A guy did an experiment to demonstrate that he could control your behavior. And he hooked a guy up to some wires and put him in a chair and flipped little switches and made his fingers twitch and stuff like that. And he said, see, you're just a bundle of nerves, just responding to stimuli. And the guy in the chair looked at him and said, watch this. And he twitched his finger. He said, did you do that or did I do that? And what did the guy say? Well, I didn't hit any switches. Well, there you go. So what bundle of nerves stimulated that finger to move? It was me, the person who lives inside this body, that has the capacity in my head to say to my finger, twitch, and it twitches. And that, to me, is the best proof that I'm a person living inside this body. Have you ever heard people say that you have a soul? It's like the emphasis is on your body and you have a dimension called a soul. Well, from an eternal perspective, I'm going to leave this body someday and be in the presence of the Lord. I'm really a living soul that happens to live in a body on this earth. And when I leave this body and go to heaven, I'll be absent from the body, but I'll be present with the Lord. And someday, for some reason, because God values what He created when He formed me in my mother's womb, God sees fit to join the body and the soul back together again in some kind of resurrected form that we have no way of comprehending till we get to heaven and see what it's all about. And behaviorists just don't like that idea. They like to think that, in fact, B.F. Skinner made this statement in one of his books. He said, I can take any child and make him anything I want him to be, and through behavior conditioning and through rewards and punishment and that kind of thing. And the guy who was talking to him in this conversation made this statement. I couldn't believe this when I read it. And he said, you sound a bit like God. And Skinner's response was, there is a great similarity, isn't there? Now see, I'm wondering when he made that statement why we didn't see him out walking around in the lawn eating grass. Like that guy in the Old Testament who got a little bit too much of a big head about this whole thing. But for some reason, God didn't do that to him. But don't let mechanistic, deterministic theories that deny the spiritual dimension of man, don't let them rob you of the richness of understanding the human experience. And I will tell you this, that there's just a whole lot of these mechanistic, deterministic behaviorists out there. And one of the things that puzzles them, no matter where they go to study people groups, their assumption is that people are just doing what they're doing because of stimuli and responses and behavioristic mechanisms. But they noticed something about all these different groups of people. They all tend to be religious, and they can't figure out where that comes from. Now, where do you think that comes from? How were we created? What does it say in Genesis? He created us in what? His own image and likeness. So he created us with this spiritual dimension that longs for spiritual connections. And if you don't connect properly with God, then you're going to create, if I can use that word, you're going to generate out of your own mind some other kind of connection that you can equate to, that can satisfy that spiritual longing, and that you can kind of equate to God. And that's why there are so many religions that have simply men coming up with their own ideas about it, because they don't like what God has revealed about the kind of relationship he wants us to have with him. Page 2 and 3, or questions 2 and 3. Question 3, what does research tell us about the personalities of newborns? And here we are again with the same thing from the other books, and we won't spend much time with it. What's he call them? The difficult child, the easy child, and the slow to warm up child. And he still uses that word difficult, except he introduces something. He calls the difficult child the strong-willed child. And I kind of like that phrase that he uses when he talks about strong-willed children. And what they can accomplish in life. Telling parents, as he talks about them, he's even written a whole book on them, that they might give you a lot of grief, but in the end, if you just tough it out, they'll accomplish a lot in life. You just have to be willing to work with them and work through all the stuff they're going to work through to get to where God eventually wants them to be in life. Got your eye. Page 3. Tell me why some kids with every advantage and opportunity seem to turn out bad, while others raised in terrible homes become pillars in the community. Can you tell me why that happens? Is there something going on inside each living human being that says, no matter what kind of environment we grow up in, we have choices we can make to where we can escape that environment and create a whole new world that we live in, or find a new world we want to live in that's completely different than the one we grew up in? Now, I can see why somebody who grew up in a terrible home situation would want to escape that and get away from it. Now, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, okay? You know, I didn't get saved until I was 18 years old. But this puzzles me. How could someone grow up in a Christian home with all of that wonderful Christian experience and then long for something else? Do any of you know someone who grew up in a Christian home and just abandoned it and threw it all away and went another direction in their life? Have you talked to them about why they made that choice? Is it kind of embarrassing to ask them why they made that choice? I mean, sometimes I do ask embarrassing questions, not to try to embarrass people, but because I'm curious as to why they would make that choice. I want to say that what prompted you to walk away from all that good stuff in life and choose the life you're now living? Have you ever heard anyone who's walked away from it talk about why they left it? The closest I came to it was working with high school kids when some high school kid said, I'm so sick of my parents telling me what to do, as soon as I get out of high school, I'm going to join the Marines. What's going to happen to him as soon as he signs on the dotted line and they put him on the bus and drop him off at the Marine Training Center?
He's going to be annoyed because everyone else is going to be telling him what to do.
He is not going to do anything without somebody there telling him what to do or critiquing what he's doing. What is he thinking? I'm thinking he's just focused on, I don't like my parents telling me what to do. Well, okay, deep down in your heart, do you like people telling you what to do? I mean, you just walk up to people and your friends and you say, hey, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. We don't do that because what? Don't we have a natural, depraved inclination to say, don't tell me what to do? But I have that inclination, but then I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's one of those basic drives that can get you in all kinds of trouble. Don't go that way. Well, I'm just curious to see the way the other side lives. If you're talking about the criminal element, go watch the way they live in prison. Oh, I'll be a criminal who doesn't get caught. I'm sorry, but you will eventually. Well, you don't know everything about everything. Okay, so I don't know everything about everything. I admit that. Neither do you. We both have something to learn. Let's look around and see who's figured out a better way to live, and then let's follow those people. I don't want to follow anybody. I want to chart my own course. It's just like, what? I think the Bible talks about them as being rebellious. They just rebel for some reason against whatever help people are trying to give them. And I just think, hey, you just have to let these people learn the hard way. And many of them get to the end of life and say, boy, I messed up big time. I made some bad choices. And sometimes you wish you could record that and then take it to younger people and say, listen to what happened with these people. Don't make those same kinds of choices. Oh, I better mention this from page 3 also. Talking about those 3 categories of children, Dr. Dobson says not every child fits into one of these categories. About 65% do, which means 35% of the people, or about a third of them, it's hard to categorize them as to whether they're one of those 3 or if they fit someplace else. Page 5. Does Scripture confirm that babies have temperaments or personalities before birth? Okay. Do babies have temperaments and personalities? I mean, and that would be an observational thing, wouldn't it? Okay, if they have a personality when they come into this world, then what can we assume about the way God created them? He created them with a temperament and a personality. Can we do that? Can we just say? So, does Scripture confirm? I suppose where Scripture confirms is that God formed us. He put us together in our mother's womb. And he talks about Jacob and Esau. So we can make some implications that all that you see in a newborn baby is the result of God's creative handiwork. Page 6 and 7. Somebody wrote in and said, I have 2 children who are as different as night and day. Okay. So you're one of the two children and I'm one of the two children. Here we are, the two children. We're as different as night and day. One is a Spitfire and the other's a sweetheart. Which would you rather be, the sweetheart or the Spitfire? Okay, if you had a choice for your parents to refer to you as a Spitfire or a sweetheart, which would you prefer?
Sweetheart.
Sweetheart?
Sweetheart.
Spitfire. She wants to be called a
I
Spitfire.
said sweetheart.
Oh, sweetheart? What? Anna?
I probably was the Spitfire, so
A Spitfire? You say, call me a Spitfire. I'd rather
just call me what I am.
call me what I am. Okay, call me what I am. See, I'm thinking, don't call me names. I'd rather be a sweetheart. But you say, hey, if you're not a sweetheart, then just, if I'm a Spitfire, then go ahead and call me one. But couldn't you find, Anna, if they said, you little Spitfire, you said, okay, so I am a Spitfire, but can we find another word that's more pleasant to use to label me? I'm just. Tommy, why do you ask so many questions? Because I'm inquisitive? I'm just curious about stuff? I would ask people questions, and I remember hearing this as a child. Don't be so nosy. Now, what's it have to do with my nose? What is that phrase? Sticking your nose in other people's business? I'm not sticking my nose anywhere. I'm just curious about stuff. I just have questions. That's why I'll ask people, why do you do that? Why do you make those choices? What's going on in your head? What are you thinking? And sometimes the response I would get from some adolescents and pre-adolescents is, I don't know why I did it, Mr. Bonine. I just wasn't thinking. I'm thinking, what, you were just standing there and the wind blew you in that direction? No. I guess I was just following other people. If they all walk out in the middle of the traffic and get hit by a car, you're going, well, I might as well follow them. No. And I'm saying to them, we need to start thinking about what's going on here in our lives and what's happening. Dr. Dobson says there are 11 important findings that he's talked about in one of his books, Parenting Isn't for Cowards. There's nearly 3 times as many strong-willed children as there are compliant children. So if you have children, you're probably going to get at least one strong-willed child. Most people know they have a strong-willed child early on. 1/3 know at birth, 2/3 know by the first birthday, and 92% are certain by the 3rd birthday. Conclusion 5, the temperaments of children tend to reflect those of their parents. Now, there are many exceptions, but I'm amazed at how many parents have come to me to complain about their children and the way they're behaving and the choices they're making. And I just have a standard question I ask. So do you remember when you were that age? Were you making choices like this child is making? Well, yeah, but that's why I take them to church and send them to the Christian school, because I want them to have a better life. I'm thinking, well, so do I, and we're working on it, but do you understand why they have those tendencies? And then, of course, now you have to ask the parent, so have you developed a new way of living, or are you still carrying around some of those old habits and your kid's picking up on them? Did any of you learn to drive by watching your parents drive and then flunked your driver's training test because you were just doing what Dad did when he drove the car? When my girls got their permits to learn to drive, I'm riding in the car with them, and I'm going, whoa, girls. Slow down a little bit. Hit the brakes a little sooner coming up to a stop sign. And you know what they had the nerve to say to me? You know what they said, don't you? That's what you do, Dad. I'm going, all right, you got me there. And I had to, when they started driving, had to do some real difficult adjustments in my own driving habits because I had just gotten careless with time. Page 12. Why can't parents get children to obey just by explaining what they want them to do? If I give you a reasonable explanation as to why I want you to do something, shouldn't that be sufficient for you to embrace my directive and do it? Not necessarily, because they might not be thinking the same sense that you're thinking, and sometimes it doesn't matter how reasonable it is, they just don't want to do it. I used to have teachers say, I can't believe how disobedient these children are. I'm going, what did you expect? If you have a room full of kids who are away from their parents, take a whole bunch of depraved pre-adolescents, put them in a room, 20 of them, and there's no parent there to supervise. The only one here is a teacher who has decided from her study in school that she's not going to be like a substitute parent. She's going to be their friend. Sometimes the kids would say, Mr. Bonine, you're not very friendly. I said, you know, they didn't hire me to be friendly. They hired me to help you grow up and become a responsible adult and learn what you need to learn. I was hired to be a teacher, not to be Mr. Rogers. So let's get to work. And they'd go out on the playground, and my daughters would be out there when they were little and younger in grade school, and they'd say, your dad is so mean. And they get in the car on the way home and say, Dad, the kids say you're so mean, and that's not true. And I said, well, don't tell them that that's not true. I have a job to do. If I'm going to keep my job, I have to pretty much crack the whip at school. Just make that be our little secret, that I really am a nice guy. And I think help them understand that when they grew up and had children, sometimes you just can't be the nice guy and let everybody do whatever they feel like doing, whenever they feel like doing it. Children are depraved, and we have to somehow help them submit to God's authority. Isn't that what it comes down to? Just teach them to submit to God's authority. That's why I used to say to these kids, what does God say about it? What does God think about it? How does God feel about that? Does God think that's funny? Now, and you can look at the Bible and see things that God laughs at, but I'm just saying that we need to talk to kids. If we're going to understand the nature of a child, we need to somehow ask questions that have to do with their connection to their Creator and how they respond to Him. Page 15 says, I have a very fussy 8-month-old baby who cries whenever I put her down. My pediatrician says she's healthy and that she cries just because she wants me to hold her all the time. No little baby would be that selfish, would they? I mean, the mother puts the baby down, and the baby thinks, Mom's got a lot of work to do today. She has to fix all my food. She has to clean the house. She has to cook meals for the rest of the family. She has to do all this work for me. So I'll just lay here quietly and let her go about her business. Is that what's going on inside the head of that little child? No, they haven't grown up yet enough to think about other people more than themselves. They're just little selfish bundles of loud crying. And my wife had trouble with that. They start to cry, pick them up. And finally I said, Nina, here's what the books say about that. In fact, I said, think about it. This little baby, the only time I see this little baby working up a sweat is when it's laying there screaming its lungs out because it wants you to pick it up. And I walk in the room and say, so, you're not getting your own way today, are you? It's a pretty miserable life, isn't it? And I start talking to them like they can think all that stuff inside their head when I know they can't. And I just carry on a conversation with them about, well, I just tell you that Mom's busy doing stuff and I'm not going to pick you up because you need to lay there and learn how to entertain yourself. That's why we have some of these mobiles going and things. And after a while, these little kids actually did this. After a while, they stopped crying and started looking at me because I was talking in this normal, sing-songy little child-like voice. And it's like, what's he talking about? What's going on here? And they put their arms up, and I'm going, well, I can do that too. And I put my arms up and just simply think about, I'm not going to let this little baby take charge of this household. Well, won't it hurt them to cry that much? No, it'll be some of the best exercise they get. Let them cry till they fall asleep. And have you ever heard a little baby that was wailing, wanting to be picked up, and nobody came to pick it up? I'm telling you, they can make noises that'll tear at your heart like you won't believe. And I'm thinking, where did they learn to do that? They came in this world already equipped to do that. And my job is to help them learn how that they're not the center of the universe. Page 16. What's best for children from 8 months to 18 months? How do you help them? A team of researchers on page 16 said A, human competence is found in a critical period of development between 8 and 18 months. The single most important, B, the single most important environmental factor in the life of the child is his mother. C, the amount of language directed to a child, that's people talking, not radios and televisions, is vital to the child's development and fundamental linguistic, intellectual, and social skills. I'm thinking all that time I spent talking to my little babies when they didn't understand the thing I was saying was actually benefiting them in terms of their growth and development. Those children who are given free access to living areas of their families progressed faster than those whose movements were restricted. So once they start crawling around, what do? You let them crawl anywhere. You say, well, what if we have poisons under the sink and they could poison themselves if they got in there and found it? Well, then put the poison someplace else, even if you have to lock the door, so they can have free access. Why do little babies want to crawl around the kitchen? Where do you see their mother spending a lot of time? In the kitchen. And what's the mother doing? Opening drawers and pulling things out. So what does a little kid want to do when he sees the mother opening drawers and pulling things out? And my wife used to let our girls play with any of the stuff they could open. If we had doors we didn't want them open, you can put those safety latches on them to keep them where the kids can't get in. And we would have friends over and they said, you let your girls play with all your pots and pans? And it's like, well, then what happens when you want to cook with them? And Nina said, what do you mean? They said, well, don't you have to wash them again? She goes, yeah, but so what? She goes, well, I don't want to go that much trouble. Well, then let's restrict the child's growth and development just because we don't want to do dishes. See, I don't think a lot of adults are thinking about this stuff. Give them access to stuff. Yeah, okay, guess what? These little girls see me reading books, and they come into my bookshelf, and they pull a book off, and they start flipping pages like I do, and they aren't very good at it, so they tear the page. Well, that'll be the last time they touch one of my books. No, get a piece of tape and fix it, people. Well, they've damaged the book. Well, I'm going to ask you a question here. Which is more important, all the books in your library or your child's growth and development? See, I'm thinking they're looking at what's going on in the adult world and they're exploring, and we need to give them a lot more freedom to do this stuff. E, the nuclear family is the most important educational delivery system. If we're going to produce capable, healthy children, it'll be by strengthening family units. What's the family unit that we're talking about for a child? A father and a mother? So, what happens to these kids who come from broken homes? I think that's the right word to use for them. They come from broken homes, and consequently, they've experienced some broken development. And teachers have to deal with that and work with that. Now, people can grow up and overcome those that brokenness, but it just takes time and it takes a lot of help, and we have to be sensitive to those people's needs. F, the best parents were those who excelled at 3 functions. They were superb designers and organizers of their children's environment. So what do you think our children had in their rooms? A TV? No. Why would they have a TV in their room? They have books and toys and things to play with that'll stimulate their growth and development. But you know why a lot of parents like a TV? You can put the kid in front of a TV and he'll just sit there like a zombie for hours on end. Well, guess what? Stick him in front of that TV in his little bouncy chair, and don't be surprised if in a few years you got a little zombie walking around. And you go, what happened to my child? And I said, you didn't read Dobson's book on page 16 and do the kind of things you need to do to help him become a responsible adult. Number 2, they permitted their children. Seems like that would be, the best parents were those who excelled at 3 things. 1, they were superb designers and organizers of their children's environments. 2, they permitted their children to interrupt them for brief 30-second episodes during which personal consultation, comfort, or information was exchanged. And 3, they were firm disciplinarians while simultaneously showing great affection for their children. Say, what? You let your kids interrupt what you're doing? I'm talking to somebody, and they come up and they pull on my pant leg, and I'm going, just a minute. And I say to the adult, just a minute, what is it you need? And I talk to them a little bit about it. And then I say, okay, and I try to take care of that because, okay, watch this. So who's more important to me, this adult that I'm talking to or this child that I'm trying to raise?
Hopefully the child.
Who else is watching out for this child except me? So what? Go pull on a stranger's pant leg. I'm busy talking to my friends. I mean, come on, people. And in fact, this became, when I started working with young people, both in the school setting and in the church setting, one time my wife said to me, Tom, she said, you can spend so much of your life helping other people's children that you ignore your own 2 little daughters. And I was so glad she said that because I said, wow, that's true. And what I realized is there are all these people who want you to help their children and their youth group. And they're not thinking about my daughters because those daughters are my responsibility. So I have to be the one who says, no, I can't do that. One time a guy asked me, can you come and speak to our youth group on a Thursday night? And I said, let me check my calendar. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I'm booked that Thursday. He goes, you're booked on Thursday? What are you doing? And I said, well, it says here I'm taking my daughter to the library to check out some books. And he goes, well, can't you ask your daughter to pick a different time? I said, if you really want me that bad, can't you reschedule your meeting for another day of the week? He said, no. I said, well, there's other people who can do it, so call somebody else. Sorry, I'm not available. So now he tried to talk me out of making my child a priority. Guess what he said at the end of the phone call? I admire you, Tom, for making your children a priority. And what I wanted to say to him, but I didn't. Because if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. But what I wanted to say was, yeah, you admire me for it, but you tried to talk me out of it and made me feel bad for saying no. But then I realized that's just the way life's going to be. I'm going to have to make my children a priority. And that's just what's going to happen in life. And I'm not always going to have everybody else commending me for it. But I'm not doing it for their commendations. I'm doing it because these are my two children, and the two people who have been given responsibility to raise them are myself and my wife. And everybody else in the world has other things to take care of. So if they're not going to take care of my children, then I'm going to make them a priority. Page 17. What's best? Okay, I'm sorry. At age 21, I became pregnant and had a baby girl. The father and I never married, which doesn't surprise me. You would think that if a man got a girl pregnant, he would own up and man up and marry her, right? And help raise the kid? Well, ladies, when you're counseling all those young adolescents, let them know that most men running around are just dogs. What can I say? If he's a gentleman, he wouldn't be doing the kind of things that would get you pregnant. I mean, the Bible addresses this issue. It tells me to treat older women, does anyone know the verse that talks about that? Treat older women as mothers and treat younger women as sisters. Now, did any of you guys have a sister? Do you guys? Okay, a younger sister?
Older.
Older sisters? Okay, younger sisters? Okay, Micah, if some dog at school took an interest in your younger sister and you knew the kind of behavior he had, what would you say to your younger sister? Stay away from him? And if he persisted, what would you say to him?
Stay away from her.
Stay away from my sister, buddy. Find somebody else to mess up. Leave my sister alone. And if you look at that dynamic and say, if every man in the world treated all the younger women as sisters, guarding them from all the dogs in life who want to take advantage of them, and treating older women as mothers, honoring them, you see how it would avoid a whole lot of grief in life? But instead, we live in a world that just seems to foster selfishness, and it's just too bad. My daughter's almost 3 years old, and I know she'll soon be asking questions about her daddy. How should I explain this situation to her, and when should the explanation be given? And here's what Dobson says. Eventually, you'll want to tell your daughter the whole story about her father and describe your relationship with him, but now's not the time. She needs to be older and more mature. But don't be untruthful and make up stories that you'll have to admit to later. I mean, let's face it. If the girl got pregnant, then here's what she was thinking. This man is the love of my life, and if I get pregnant, he will marry me. And when he didn't, She found out, A, he wasn't the love of her life, or she wasn't the love of his life, and B, he was a despicable man who wouldn't own up and be responsible to take care of the child. And you would think a man who would behave like that would at least be willing to help pay the bills. If he's that despicable, what makes you think he's going to come up with any money to help pay for raising the child? I mean, it's the book of Proverbs tells men, watch out for despicable women. Life tells women, what? Watch out for despicable men. There's a whole bunch of them out there. Okay, page 18. My 5-year-old is developing a problem with lying. I don't know how to handle it. What does Dobson say on page 18? Lying is a problem with which every parent must deal. Do you remember lying to your parents? Or is that one of those things that you've put out of your mind? I don't want to think about it. Do any of you remember what your parents did when you lied to them? And they caught you telling a lie? Any of you remember? You don't want to talk about it?
I don't remember what they did when I was younger, but when I got older, they would ground me from like my phone or electronics.
They would take away some of your privileges?
Mm-hmm.
Because lying is a violation of God's standards for life. Why is lying so damaging to the human experience? Do any of you know someone who lies about stuff all the time? Have any of you ever had a friend who lied to you? What did that do to the friendship?
Can't trust him.
I mean, isn't that what happens? The human spirit says, if they lied to me once, I can't trust them not to lie to me again. Lying is so damaging to the human experience. It puts people in a situation where you say, I can't trust them. And in fact, if you have a friend who lies to you often enough, you decide to say, I don't want to be friends with that person. They're just not friend worthy. And by the way, watch how it damages the human experience. The person who lies all the time, watch what he'll say to you when you tell him something. He'll say, is that really the truth? Well, if it wasn't the truth, I wouldn't have said it. Why is he asking me if I'm really telling the truth? Because watch how his human experience has been damaged. If he's lying about stuff, then he assumes that everybody else is lying about stuff too. So he just really damages his social relationships, and he damages his own outlook on life, and pretty soon nobody wants to be around him. I think probably the most effective thing my parents did was talk to me about how damaging lying is to yourself and to other people. It's just not a healthy thing to do, is the way they put it. Tell the truth, even if there are negative consequences. In fact, I remember they said, tell the truth even if it gets you in trouble. Whatever trouble you can get in from behaving some way in school. Okay, you're sitting in class, the teacher turns her back, and you flick a spit wad at somebody across the room. And they go, ow! And they said it real loud because why? They want the teacher's attention. And so the teacher goes, what's wrong, Johnny? And little Johnny, tattletale, hanging on a bull's tail, says, Tommy threw a spitwad at me. I can't believe anybody is so big a baby that he tells on someone for flicking spitwads. I mean, if he flicked one at me, I wouldn't tell on him. I would just catch him at recess and work him over. And the teacher says, did you flick a spitwad at little Johnny? So now, what do I say based on what my parents taught me? Yes, I did. And I take whatever punishment comes my way. And you know what I discovered in life? When I was honest, the consequences were not near as painful as if I would have lied about it and carried that lie around with me. Because sometimes I did lie about stuff. Not to my parents, as much to this principal I had at school that I didn't like very much. And I remember carrying that lie around, knowing that I lied to him, and knowing that he believed it, and how damaging that was to my spirit. And even though I'd be honest with my parents, when I got to be an adolescent, before I got saved, I kind of practiced telling lies so I could do it without my face turning red and giving me away. That's sick. My wife says it's a good thing I got saved. I would have been a mess if I would have kept going on the path I was on. And I say, thank you, Lord, for delivering me from all that. But when I got saved and came to Bible college, I realized that, that lying stuff you figured out how to do is God hates it. 6 things God hates, yea, 7 are an abomination to him. And what are the first 2 things on the list? A proud look and a lying tongue. Well, I'm not proud about stuff, but watch this. The people who walk around with an arrogant attitude, they're violating the number 1 thing God hates. I'm at least at number 2, but God hates lying, so don't do it. Just give it up and let it go. And God hates arrogance. So give it up and let it go. Humble yourself before God. And let him take care of the situations in life. Don't go arrogant. He hates that. And he also hates lying. Okay, so help your kids understand how wrong it is. And telling, on page 19 it says, telling the truth is something God cares about, and therefore it should matter to us. And that's why I say, if God cares about it, then we should care about it. The next time your child tells a blatant lie, you can return to this discussion and to the scriptures on which it's based. At some point, when you feel the maturity level of the youngster makes it appropriate, you should begin to insist that the truth be told and to impose mild punishment if it isn't. Have any of you ever had to write a Bible verse? Like if you were struggling with obeying your parents, and your parents said, I want you to write, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. I want you to write that 100 times on a piece of paper. Were any of you given that assignment at school by a teacher to write something?
So we'd have spelling tests, and then we'd have a big test from all the spelling tests, and if we missed the same word on both tests, we'd have to write it 50 times.
50 times?
Yeah.
And my specialty was learning to write so small that I could get all 50 times in just a tiny little paragraph. Except I never remember, I wasn't good at spelling, but I don't remember them telling me to do that with spelling tests, but they would tell me all the time in study hall, if my nickname was Motor Mouth, Tommy, stop talking. So they would say, I want you to write, I will not talk in study hall. I will not talk in study hall 100 times. And so I'd see how small I could write it before I turned it in. But I'm thinking that there's some benefit and value to that. And especially from a Christian perspective, find some Bible verses that talk about the issue and have them copy those Bible verses over and over and over again to fix God's Word in their mind and hopefully in their hearts where it'll make a difference in their lives. Bottom of page 19, I'm concerned about the violent content of some children's cartoon shows and the toys and other products connected with them. Are you concerned about violent content that little children are being exposed to today in our culture? Are there games that adolescents play where they sit there with a little trigger thing blowing people's heads off, their limbs off, and blood's flying all over the place? Are any of those games helpful to the human spirit or helpful to human relationships? Now, if the object of the game is to kill as many people as you can, are there any games out there like that? Okay, if you really want to make the object of a game to kill as many something as you can, why not have these people become duck hunters who are feeding the poor people of the world, and they're walking around in Missouri finding conservation areas where they can shoot as many ducks as they can to feed the poor in Kansas City. And you still have the same competition of killing something, except now you're killing something to feed somebody. You follow the difference? You still have the competition. Why do we have to put this violent flavor to it? Say, well, because it appeals to people. What part of the human psychic, what part of the human nature does it appeal to? The healthy part, the wholesome part, or the degenerate part? And I'm telling you, we keep hearing more and more reports about elementary school kids taking guns to school and shooting somebody because they're upset with something. And if you ask me, do you think videos with people shooting other people would tend to encourage a young person who's mad at somebody and who has access to a gun to do that? I'm going, yes, it would. It's not the guns we need to get rid of in America. It's all the violent entertainment that's going on in America. That's what we need to get rid of. I don't understand why that's so hard for people to see. To me, it just seems pretty obvious. Page 20. Do you think a child should be required to say thank you and please around the house? Or should they only have to say it when they're out in public around other people? What do you think?
All the time.
All the time? If they don't have to do it around the house, they probably won't do it out in public. If they're required to do it around the house, were all of you taught to say please and thank you? Logan was? The rest of you were?
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't, may I suggest that you start working on a little project. And it's called Giving Honor to Whom Honor is Due. The principle in the Bible that drives me to this kind of project. If you weren't raised with please and thank you, then start a little project. Like, for example, if I decided I wanted to work on a project this coming week, I'd say, okay, you know what? When I get home and I sit down after I get through teaching my classes and my wife brings me some lunch and she says, would you like to have something to drink? And I will say, cranberry juice sounds good. And she says, okay, and she gets me some cranberry juice. Now, what could I say instead of cranberry juice sounds good?
Cranberry juice, please.
May I have some cranberry juice, please? And then she says, sure. And when she brings it to me, what would I say next?
Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe, just for fun, we all ought to take a little project and say, let's see how many times we can say please and thank you during the next week before we meet next Monday, and see what kind of effect it has on our own psychic, our own human experience, and on our relationships to other people. Just try it with somebody, with a roommate. Often, one of the best places to do this, if you just want to work on something for the fun of it, to do a little, what I call social experiment, is do it with someone who's really close to you, someone you tend to just, because of your human depravity, take for granted, and do it with somebody close to you and see what happens. Okay. Page 21. My children love to do things for themselves, but they make such a mess. It's easier for me to do it for them. Sure enough. So let's take the easy way out, right? No, let's do the messy thing and help our children learn how to do things, how to develop their skills and competencies. Do you think I'm wrong to step in and do things for them? And what does Dr. Dobson say? See, this is what I love about his book. See, this book was written because he has all these people sending him questions, and he took, not all the questions, of course, but he took a lot of the questions and put them in this book, and that's what makes it so good. And I love the way he answered it. I think you are wrong. Thank you, Dr. Dobson. Well, don't you think by saying it that way you're going to hurt the person's feelings? Well, if he doesn't tell them he thinks they're wrong, then he's lying to them. You follow me? I understand how you feel. Now, he's being nice about it. Even though I understand how you feel, it's still wrong to step in. Just let them acquire some skills. Let them make a mess out of things if that's what it takes to learn something. And sometimes the stuff they'll want to make will be the stuff that will be the messiest to deal with. Page 23. You've been very critical of behavioral scientists and other writers who recommend a more permissive approach to child rearing. Explain why this concerns you. Why is it wrong to be kind and merciful to a boy or girl? Now, do you guys follow what this person just said? What did they equate with being permissive? Are they equating a permissive approach with being kind and merciful? Do you follow that? I'm in favor of being kind and merciful, but I see kind. I mean, if I see a parent doing a kind thing, if I see a parent doing a merciful thing, and I see a parent doing a permissive thing, those are not synonymous. A permissive parent is one, well, I really think the reason they're being permissive is they don't want to be bothered with going to the trouble to raise the child, so they're just letting the child do whatever because they don't want to have to work at parenting. And that doesn't have anything to do with being merciful or kind. A kind parent would watch a child pulling out the drawers, climbing up to get a cookie, and falling. A kind parent would say, hey, let me help you get a cookie. And then when the mother comes in and goes, I don't think eating cookies is a good idea right before dinner. Oh, so you can't have a cookie because it'll spoil your dinner. No, let's be a little merciful. Let's take, you pick the cookie you want. Let's put it in on the table by your plate, and then that can be your dessert after you eat your dinner. You follow me? It's like I'm just being showing mercy to the child, showing kindness to the child. But the permissive parent would just say, hey, if he falls down and hurts himself, he'll learn from his mistakes. If he gets up there and gets the cookie, he eats what he wants. It's none of my business. I'm in the other room watching Wide World of Sports. I've got better things to do than supervise this child and help them learn to be what they ought to be. They'll have to learn it on their own. I'm going, this is not like raising baby ostriches. I like watching nature shows, and I'm amazed at how some of these little critters that are born in the wild, baby quail are the same way. They're born, and then all of a sudden they take off, and they function pretty much like their adult parents. If you take a little child home from the hospital and just put them in the middle of your living room and say, there you are, figure out where the food is, figure out where the water is, figure out how to live on your own, the child's going to die, people. It's not like out there in the world of nature where God has designed those animals to work like that. He's saying these little helpless infants need us to raise them. And don't equate being permissive with being anything positive. I can't think of any place where a permissive parent, let's see, my daughter's got a driver's license, so she knows how to drive. And she even got a job so she could earn some money to buy a car. And now she has a car and a job with money to buy gas, and her friends want her to take them everywhere. And if I was a permissive parent, I would just let her load herself up, her car up with herself and her teenage friends. Does anyone know what happens to the mathematical probability of an accident when you start putting other teenagers in a car with a teenage driver? One teenager pretty well doubles the likelihood of an accident because of the distraction of talking to the person next to you. Two teenagers, 2 times 2 is 4. It pretty well quadruples the likelihood of an accident. 3 teenagers in a car and you're driving, 2 times 2 times 2, 8 times more likely to have an accident. It's an exponential thing. It is not wise to permit a teenage driver to haul other teenagers around. In fact, it's just dangerous until they've had enough driving experience with only themselves in the car to where they've developed a certain amount of, I'm going to call it expertise, but you know what I'm going to call it? Automaticity. Have you driven a car long enough to where some things become automatic? You pull up at an intersection, you look both ways, even if the light's green, to see if everybody's going to stop at the traffic light. You've developed some good driving habits, and you've become a safe driver. And you need to develop that before you start hauling around teenagers. And a permissive parent who says, I don't care, they can haul around anybody they want. I'm going, do you know what the statistics are? It's just too dangerous. So I don't have anything positive to say about a permissive parent. Everything I've read about them and studied about them says that they damage children. Okay, page 25. The healthiest approach to child rearing is found in the safety of the middle ground between disciplinary extremes. And Dr. Dobson says, I attempt to illustrate this on the cover of my first book, Dare to Discipline, which included this little diagram. Love and control. Children tend to thrive best in an environment where these two ingredients, love and control, are present in balanced proportions. When the scale tips in either direction, problems usually begin to develop at home. Unfortunately, parenting styles in a culture tend to sweep back and forth like a pendulum from one extreme to the other. So it's like the kids need more control. No, the kids need more love. And sometimes love means letting them do whatever they want to do. And it's like, we need to find a balance here. And the word I used to use, the phrase I used to use with my daughters is, I love you too much to let you do that. Did any of you have parents who said things like that to you? I love you too much to let you do that. God loves you too much to let you get away with doing that. That's why you get caught. And God has given me a job to do. And that job is to help you to become the person that God wants you to be. So there are some times when I'm going to say no, because I know it's in your best interest, when I wish I didn't have to say no. But if I didn't say no, then I wouldn't be a responsible parent. So I kind of shy away from the word control. But in fact, I use a lot of these psychological techniques to influence my children. And they figured it out early on and turned around and used it on me. We would leave school when we were in Peoria, headed home, and the youngest would say, Dad, can we stop and get an ice cream cone on the way home? Because it was right by an ice cream place that sold that soft ice cream. And I would always say this, I don't think so, not today. Oh, Dad, you never let us have ice cream. And I just keep on driving. And then her sister says to her, Sister, if you'll say, okay, Dad, whatever you say, he'll go back and buy ice cream. And she goes, okay, Dad, whatever you say. And I drive around the block and go back and buy ice cream. Now, who's messing? I mean, who's affecting whose behavior here? I'm doing something to change the way they behave. And once they figure that out, they know if they change their behavior, it'll change the way I behave. And both of us are going to end up benefiting from it because we build a stronger and a healthier and a better relationship if what we're trying to accomplish is in line with the Word of God. Okay, page 27. At what age should discipline begin? What does Dobson say? During the first year, a youngster needs to be held, loved, and calmed by a soothing human voice. He should be fed when hungry and kept clean and dry and warm. The foundation for emotional and physical health is laid during the 12-month period, which should be characterized by security, affection, and warmth. So, what's he saying here? For the first, well, he says it right here at the top. There should be no physical punishment for a child younger than 15 to 18 months old. Now, again, if you read the preface to this, it's really cool. If you go up here and read why he wrote this book, the introduction, it's 1, 2, 3 pages long. It's really worth taking the time to read. But Dr. Dobson says that he gives a reason for writing his book, and then he says, some of what I'm going to tell you, I've gleaned from Scripture. Some of it I've gleaned from the experience of parents that I've talked to. And other things, it's simply my own personal opinion. So, what would you say? Did he get this from other people? Or is this a Dobsonism? Sometimes when I'm talking about some of these things and somebody says, so do you think everybody ought to... Well, okay, when we had our 2 daughters when they were younger, and we would have friends because I was a teacher, they would say, so do you think I ought to treat my boys that way, and I'm going, I don't know anything about raising boys. I'm just raising daughters. And I'm thinking each guy needs to ask God for wisdom on how to raise the kids he's given. And we had 2 daughters, and both of them were treated a little differently because of their different personalities. So I say you just need to ask God for wisdom and make some decisions between you and God, and don't try to just do what everybody else does. I know this, if a man who has a couple of sons tries to raise his kids like I raise my daughters, he's probably gonna do them a disservice, isn't he? Because I have grandsons now, and there's no question that I interact with my grandsons much differently than I do my granddaughter or daughters. And I just think, hey, everybody has to sort out how God wants him to do this. But I like his suggestion, and the reason I like it is I like what he says about it. An infant is incapable of comprehending his or her offense or associating it with the resulting consequences. You understand? What he's saying is that if discipline doesn't really register unless the child is mature enough to understand the consequences, that those are consequences for inappropriate behavior. So that's why he says that under 15 months, he doesn't recommend punishing little children. Page 29. Please describe the best approach to the discipline of a 1-year-old. How does a parent discipline a 1-year-old? Very carefully and gently. A child at this age is easy to distract and divert. Rather than jerking a wristwatch from his or her hand, show him or her a brightly colored alternative, and then be prepared to catch the watch when it falls. When unavoidable confrontations do occur, win by firm persistence, but not by punishment. Let's put our coat on. It's time to go to church. I don't want to wear a coat. I'm not going to let them go outside and freeze to death in 24-degree weather. So I'm going to say, well, I don't necessarily want to wear a coat either, but it's just the wise thing to do. So if you want to be a wise child, you'll put your coat on. No. So here's this little kid, this tall, telling me no to put a coat on. Do you understand why I just pull up a chair and I just sit down and I take the little child and I hold him between my knees and I take the coat and I put in one arm and I say, it would be irresponsible of me to let you go outside, put the other arm in, without wearing a coat. Because it's dangerous out there, it's dangerously cold, and this is the way you stay warm. And I know you don't understand all this, but that's why when you don't understand it, you just learn to obey your parents. And I zip the coat up, put the hood over, tie the string real tight so they can't get it undone. I say, now we're ready to go to church. And I've actually done that, not only with my own children, but I've done that in children's church with little kids who said no to wearing a coat when it was time to go outside and play. And here's a big adult and here's a little child. And you go, well, I don't know what to do when they say no. I'm not going to put my coat on. I'm not going to put my boots on. Well, you take that little chipper and you put the coat and the boots on them. That's what you do. And it isn't like I'm going to yell or scream at them. I'm just going to talk to them about why we do this and why I'm in charge and why it's a good thing they're not in charge. They'd be sorry if they went outside without a coat, and just move on from there. Page 32. I have a 2-year-old who's as cute as a bug's ear, and I have no idea what that means. Do any of you know what a bug's ear looks like? And I love him dearly. I'm glad for that, I understand that. But he nearly drives me crazy. Now that I don't get. He throws the most violent temper tantrums and gets into everything. Why is he like this? Okay. And are other toddlers so difficult? And the answer is yes, there are other toddlers out there that are that difficult. And why is he like this? He throws temper tantrums because he doesn't get his way, because he's selfish. And why does he get into everything? Because he's curious. So I'm thinking we'll handle the temper tantrum one way and the getting into everything another way. And maybe we'll just learn to let him get into things. Did any of you ever go to your grandparents and have something that you love to get into at their house, but when you did, you got in trouble for getting into it? None of you? My grandmother had this big storage bin that she kept quilts in for the wintertime. And it was just so cool to climb in there and crawl down in the quilts and cover up with them and hide so nobody could find you. Now, why would that bother my grandmother for me to do that? Okay, the quilts were all folded and stacked nicely. What happens when I crawl down underneath and start unraveling all of them to hide and cover up so nobody can find me? I made a mess in her quilt bin. And every time I did it, I got in trouble. And I knew the next time I went to her house, if I did it, I'd get in trouble again. But it was so much fun, I did it anyway. And now, after reading what Dobson says, I'm thinking, Grandma, is it really that important to keep the quilts all folded up like that? If the grandkids like playing in that, then let them play in that. They're just having fun and being curious. But if he wails down on the floor and throws a temper tantrum, to me the best cure for a temper tantrum is when you see the kid throwing one, you go, hey, Logan, come over here and look at this. Look at this guy throwing a temper tantrum. What's that all about? Come here, watch him. It's really funny. And pretty soon the kid goes, and he will. He'll quit and he'll look at us like, this isn't the way it's supposed. This isn't the way it plays out when Mom's here. Mom goes crazy and gives me what I want. And I'm just talking about him wailing on the floor. I'd say, and Logan, hey, why don't you lay on the floor and wail down like he's doing too, just to see how it feels. And Logan goes, no, I don't think so. And finally the little kid just says, see, little kids who throw tantrums, they only do it because they get something from it. If they get nothing from it except a weird look and a little bit of laughter for their erratic behavior, they quit doing it. They find something else. The little kid wants something and he goes, I want a cookie, Poppy. I'm going, well, I do too. And so I say, would you please get me a cookie? No, would you please get me 2 cookies and maybe I'll share one with you? Now, what's the condition for the maybe I'll share one with you? What do I want him to say? What's the words we're trying to teach kids to use? Please and thank you. May I have a cookie, please, Poppy? You sure can. And what do you say, bud? Thank you. I mean, it's just not natural. You teach it, either by your example or by just direct instruction. Page 33, my 3-year-old can be counted on to behave like a brat whenever we're in the mall or in a restaurant. He seems to know I'll not punish him there in front of other people. Well, we just found a place where my mom won't punish me. Was there any place in the world where you could go where your mom didn't punish you? Or your dad? Did anybody have a place like that? Where you could get away with doing anything? Do you understand why I'm saying, what are some of these parents that are, these are real people writing in real letters? Where are these people coming from? What are these people thinking? There is no place in the world where I'm going to take a child where the rules are suspended and he can get away with doing anything he wants. Because if he learns that, his depravity will start oozing out of him and he'll be doing stuff he shouldn't be doing. Well, what in the world? Page 39, chapter 4. According to my chart, I was supposed to finish that today. Well, I guess I'll have to do 4, 5, 6, and 7 on Wednesday because we're out of time.